Hello and good morning, dear students. My name is Dr. Shuaib Mohammed Butt. I am working as assistant professor in the Department of English at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. The topic for today's video lecture is elements of communication. We talked about communication. We talked about different types of communication. So today in this lecture, our main focus will be on elements. What are the different elements which we require for communication, for a successful communication? For an effective communication, we require some elements. So today we shall be talking about those elements which we require for effective communication. Let's just recapitulate what communication is. When we talk about communication, it's derived from a Latin word communis, which means common. So communication has its roots in a Latin word which is communis, and it means common. Now, how is this common associated with communication? And how does this common mean to share ideas, to talk about your opinions? Because what we discussed in the previous class, there we talked like communication is the process of sharing ideas, sharing opinions, sharing our information, sharing knowledge, sharing different things. So when we share anything, whether it is knowledge, whether it is any information, whether it is any idea, whether it is any opinion, whether it is any emotion, so when we share it, we make it common. When we express it to the people, when people get to know about a certain idea or a particular idea or about a specific opinion, so we make that idea or opinion, we make that common by sharing. So communication, it has its roots in Latin, where the root word is communis, and it means to make someone common. So that means to share someone, to talk about someone or something, to transmit. So this is all what we get from the roots of the word communication. So then we can say in general, communication, it refers to the exchange of information, ideas, facts, opinions, beliefs, attitudes through verbal and non-verbal means. It may be between two people or it may be within a group. So in general, communication, it refers to an exchange of ideas, exchange of information, exchange of facts, opinions, beliefs, knowledge. And this happens through verbal or non-verbal means. Obviously, we are sharing information through verbal communication. Now, what is verbal communication? Verbal communication is communication which is done by the words or word of mouth, which is done by words, and these words are both. These are oral or these are written. Words can be oral and words can be written. Sometimes we speak to others, that's oral communication. And sometimes we write to others, that is written communication. Both these communications, they belong to an umbrella term which is called verbal communication. So communication is sharing of ideas, sharing of information, or sharing of anything. This sharing It may be through verbal or non-verbal means. Verbal I told you, now let's come to non-verbal. What is non-verbal? Non-verbal is your body language. These are your facial expressions. This is vocalics, which contains speed, which contains tone, which contains stress shifts. So this is non-verbal, where your body language works, your facial expressions or your gestures, different body gestures, and vocalics, where your tone speaks, your speed, your stress. So communication, it is sharing of ideas, sharing of information through verbal means or through non-verbal means, through oral communication, through speaking, through written communication, through body language, through facial expressions, through vocalics, through stress, or through gestures. And this communication, it occurs either between two people or it occurs between groups of people. So communication, it sometimes occurs between two people only. There may be only two people communicating to each other, but sometimes there are groups of people who are communicating to each other. So communication is not restricted in between only two people or in between only three people. No, it can vary. It can be between two people or it can be between within a group of people. So this is communication. Let's go with the definitions of communication. We have certain definitions. Let's talk about these definitions of communication. What is communication? First, I would like to talk about Robert Anderson. What Robert Anderson says about communication, he says, communication is interchange of thoughts, opinions, or information by speech, writing, or signs. His speak is the same thing which I told you in the previous slide. He says communication, it's interchange, it is the changing, it is the transmitting, it is sharing, it's expressing of thoughts, opinions, information. And we share these thoughts, information, or opinion, etc. by speech, by words, by writing, oral communication, written communication, or signs, or by non-verbal communication. So we got a support, we got a fact by Anderson. Anderson says, yes, it is sharing of ideas, information, etc. by verbal and non-verbal means. Then, let's see what John Newstrom says. John W. Newstrom says. He says, communication is the transfer of information. Again, transfer. Information means everything which a person wants to transmit from one person to another, or it may be within a group. And he believes that it is a way of reaching other or others by transmitting idea, facts, thoughts, feelings, and values. He says it is a way of reaching to others. Communication is sharing of information and it is a way to reach to others. We reach to others with the help of communication. We make others feel what we are, who we are by communication. Or we know about others by communication. Or we make others to feel this about a certain activity with the help of communication. Or we make others to act according to our expectations with the help of communication. So that's why John W. Newstrom says it is a way to reach to others. It is a way to reach to others means to communicate to others, to share with others, to talk to others, to behave with others. So this is what Newstrom says about communication. Now, let's jump to the elements of communication, which is the main topic for today's discussion. Let's see what what are the main elements? The main elements are, there are 7 elements of communication. Number 1 is sender. Number 2 is encoding. Number 3 is message. Number 4 is channel. Number 5 is decoding. Number 6 is the receiver. And number 7 is feedback. These are the 7 points which are required for a communication process. So these are elements. Every communication is incomplete without these elements. And every communication requires to take the help of these 7 elements in order to make a communication successful. So communication requires these 7 elements. Let's talk about these 7 elements one by one. Let us see what these 7 elements are and how are they helpful in order to make a communication successful. For the formation of communication, these 7 elements play a vital role. Let us see what is their role. The first one is sender. It may seem a long slide to you, but it is replete with the essential information regarding a sender. The sender is also known as the encoder of the message. The sender is the first element of a communication, and the sender is also known as the encoder. Sender is the person who encodes a message. Encoding we shall be discussing in the upcoming slides. The sender plays a specific role in initiating communication. To initiate the communication, it is sender who plays a specific role. Or we can say, in other words, every communication is impossible without sender. Because no communication can be initiated without the role of sender. It is sender who initiates a communication. It is sender who raises a communication. It is sender who starts a communication. Then, the sender is an individual. It may be a group of people. It may be an organization who initiates communication. Now, sender, it may be a single individual. See, right now I am sharing my ideas to you. I am sharing some knowledge on elements of communication to you. So, I am the sender of this communication. It is I who initiate this communication, or it is me who is initiating this communication. So, we may be a group of people who talking to you. So, a sender, it may be an individual, it may be a group of people, or sometimes it may be an organization. You may write a letter or any communication from an organization. So at that time, that particular organization is the sender or is the source of the communication, or it is that organization who initiates the communication. So it varies. It's not like only an individual should be the sender of the communication or the source of the communication. No, that's not the case. Sender may be an individual, it may be a group of people, or it may be any institute or a department or an organization. This source is initially responsible for the success of message. The success of message, it depends upon the source. So this source is important for the success of message, because the right sender can send the right messages, or the right sender can encode the message rightly, correctly. So this source, the success of the message, it depends upon the source, depends upon his mindset, depends upon his delivery of communication, depends upon his mood, depends upon his using of words, using of sentences. So this is the person who is the sole responsible for the success of communication. The sender's experiences, attitudes, knowledge, skill, perceptions, and culture influence, or the culture influences the message. The sender is important. It is his experience. It is his background. It is his existing knowledge. It is his perception, skill, and culture which is influencing the message. So when a sender writes a message, so there is the indulgence of his or her culture. So he talks on the basis of his knowledge. He shows his existing skills in that message. That's why I tell you, sender is the sole responsible for the success of the message. Because it's his whole personality that's at work when he or she initiates a dialogue. Now, to communicate effectively, the sender must use effective verbal as well as non-verbal techniques. Now, in order to speak effectively, a sender has to use effective use of verbal and non-verbal techniques. In order to make a message effective, a sender has to make good use of verbal and non-verbal communication, non-verbal techniques. Then, speaking or writing clearly, organizing your points to make them easy to follow and understand. First one is speaking clearly. Second one is organization, organizing your points to make them easy to follow and understand. Third is maintaining eye contact. Fourth is using proper grammar. And the fifth one is giving accurate information. These all are essentials in effectiveness of your message. How can you make your message effective? You should speak clearly. If you are writing, you should write clearly. Second one is organization. You should organize your points clearly so that you can be easily followed by the speaker or reader, and so that you can be understood by your listener or by your reader. Then, if you are having a face-to-face communication, maintain eye contact. If you are speaking and writing, use grammar, accurate grammar, and whatever the mode you are applying for your communication, give the accurate information. These are the essential points by which a sender can make his or her communication effective. And one should use all these elements in the speech, in the dialogue, in the discourse. And you will lose your audience. There are chances that you will lose your audience. Your audience may not be spellbound. Why? If it becomes aware of obvious oversights on your part. If we mislead your audience, if we commit a mistake, unintentional mistake, or if you become the victim of any oversight, your audience may easily give up. They may easily lose contact with you. And the sender should have some understanding of who the receiver is in order to modify the message to make it more relevant. A sender must be aware with the audience. When you are aware with the audience, then you can modify your message according to the expectations of your audience. There are some characteristics of a good sender. A good sender is always objective. A good sender always contains only the important information regarding the topic. He shares only that information. He doesn't talk about his personal opinions. A good sender always pays attention to the receiver. A good sender always constructs his message according to the expectations of the receiver. A good sender is good at organizing and treatment of the message. A good sender knows how to organize the message, how to structure the message, and how to treat the message well so that it can reach audience without any interruption or without any barrier. The second point is encoding. Very important point is encoding. You can be interpreted on the basis of your encoding. What is encoding? Encoding means converting the idea into words or gestures that will convey meaning. It is to convert your idea into words and gestures. How successful you are in converting, or if you are successful in converting your message into ideas and gestures, there are chances that you may be clearly understood by your audience or by the receiver. So, It consists in changing the information into some form of logical and coded message. It is to change your information in the form of a logical and coded message. Which words you are choosing, which sentences you are choosing, which form of non-verbal means you are using. So this all comes in encoding. What are the different proverbs you are including, different phrases you are including in your talk? It's all encoding. And this encoding process, it's based on the purpose of communication and the relation between the sender and the receiver. This encoding process, it's based on the purpose of communication. So one can better encode a message while having the purpose of communication in his or her mind. And it depends upon the relation between sender and receiver. Encoding, a sender encodes a message according to the mindset and the perception of the receiver. So that is what I mean, the relation between sender and receiver. So you are encoding your message according to the understanding level of your receiver. And in a formal situation, encoding involves. These are the points which are involved in encoding. Number one is selecting a language. See, when you select a language, you are encoding that message. It is the process of encoding. Yes, I am writing to a person who lives in England. It's better to write in English because it is his or her native language, and there are chances that your receiver may understand you well. So when you are in the process of selecting a language, it is encoding. Select a medium of communication. You are selecting a medium. Which medium you will select? Will you send by a letter by a post? Will you go with a telephone call? Will you send an email? Will you record a video and send it to that person? This process again is encoding. You are encoding that message. And select an appropriate communication form. You have to select an appropriate communication form. So therefore, in the process of communication, encoding means using symbols, language to express an idea. So while concluding this whole process, this whole activity of encoding, it means using symbols or using verbal and non-verbal means of communication to express an idea. Now comes the third point, that's message. What is message? The message is the content of communication and may contain verbal and non-verbal language or both. Message is the content, the idea, the opinion, the information, the query which you want to ask, the question which you want to get answered by the receiver. So it can be anything. And it can be in verbal or non-verbal, or it can include both verbal and non-verbal means of communication. So message is the most crucial element of effective communication. And it can come in many different forms such as oral presentation, written document, advertisement, or just a comment. Message is a crucial element. Without message, every communication is incomplete. And without message, there is no communication. Communication is anything which we are sharing or which we want to share. And this message, it can be oral presentation. It can be through oral presentation. It can happen through a written document. It may be an advertisement, or it may be just a comment which we are commenting on others. Now, so when it is very important, when it is much needed, so we should take much care in order to construct a message, in order to make our message very clear for the audience to understand. There should not be extra information. It should be listener oriented, or it should be receiver oriented. It should be according to the mindset or perception of our listener. So perception and personal factors of the sender and receiver may sometimes distort this element. And the intended outcome of communication may not be achieved. Now, a sender has to be very objective, which I told you earlier. This is one of the characteristics of sender. A sender has to always be objective. So we should refrain ourselves from sharing our perceptions and personal ideas. Why? Because our personal ideas may distort, may destroy the element, may destroy the message, and the intended outcome of communication may not be achieved. And the purpose of the communication may not be achieved if we include our personal opinions in the communication. So, we should refrain from giving our or sharing our personal ideas and personal opinions. For example, the same message may be communicated or perceived differently by two individuals. So, when we are giving some space to our personal opinions, our message may be differently perceived by individuals. Individuals may not understand us. They may take us wrong. So we should avoid, we should be objective, and we should be honest with the message. Then, a message should be clear, concise, and credible. Because I told you this is the crucial element, one of the crucial elements of the communication process, in the elements of communication. So if it is crucial, it requires care. So a good message should be clear. What's clear? Clarity should be the foundation of any message. The foundation, the main principle of your message should be clear. Because the purpose of your message is to be understood, is to be comprehended by the listener or by the receiver. So the message should be clear. If your audience cannot understand what you are trying to say, they will find it difficult to understand it. So if your audience feels your message is ambiguous, if they do not understand you, so if they do not get to know what you are trying to say, obviously it is difficult for them to understand your message. So one should stop while including ambiguous things in the message. Rather, one should make a message clear, which can be easily understood by a layman. Then concise. So this principle can be neatly summarized. It means get to the point. Be brief, be short, and to the point. Make sure you know from the start exactly what message you are trying to communicate, and do your best to communicate in a few words as possible, or if possible. First, a sender should know what I have to talk, what I have to convey. And when you are aware about what you are conveying, so convey it in the fewest possible words. Don't exceed the limit or don't exceed the length of your message. Because by exceeding the length of your message, your listener or your receiver may lose interest in your message if it is lengthy. So it is better to be concise, be brief, and be short. Then credible. So one needs to be credible. Message needs to be credible. This is the final principle. And it is key to success of any message. A common response we hear when testing messages for clients is, this would be great if it is true. Credibility. When we are checking the credibility of a message, sometimes we hear from our listeners that this would be great if it is true. So this doesn't mean to tell people what they want to hear. It means saying people something they believe you will actually do. So there should be the credibility. It's not like you are passing some obscure ideas or some obscure orders to the audience. No, it should be something which is human in nature. You should speak those things which you can do by your own. Then, otherwise you risk it being quickly dismissed as tokenism and greenwashing. Otherwise, your idea may be considered as tokenism, mislead, or greenwashing. It may be taken as you are misleading people. You are speaking about false notions. So the message should be credible. It should have some credibility. Then we have channel. What is channel? This message travels from one point to another, from one person to another. It travels through a channel, and the channel is responsible for the delivery of the chosen message form. The channel is responsible for the delivery. We deliver the message with the help of channel. The channel of communication, it constitutes the medium through which information flows from sender to receiver. It is a medium through which the information it flows, it passes, it travels, it goes from a sender to the receiver. And there are many channels of communication, like it may be a face-to-face interaction, spoken form. Sometimes you hear some information from radio. So radio is the channel or medium of your communication. Sometimes you communicate with the help of television. You get some information from television. So the channel is television. It may be an internet site where you are getting the stuff, much information. Sometimes it may be a letter. You are writing a letter in written form. It may be a book because you get a lot of information from a book and letter or magazine. So these all are the channels of communication. These all are the mediums through which we communicate, like face-to-face interaction. Sometimes you convey your information with the help of a telephone call. So that is the channel of your communication. So channel is the element by which the message travels from sender to the receiver. And one should be very careful in order to choose the channel for the communication. It is better to write about the important elements rather than speaking on telephone. Because speaking on telephone doesn't have any record, but writing always provides you a record. That's why you see all the important documents, they are having this hard copy, they are in the written form. Then it is decoding. Now comes the next point, which is decoding. What is decoding? Decoding is the decoding of a message is how an audience member is able to understand and interpret the message. Now remember, for the encoding was to choose an appropriate language, to choose the medium, to choose different words, to choose different verbal and non-verbal means, to choose the stuff which can be easily comprehended by the listener, by the receiver. Now here it is to interpret the message. To decode that encoded message means decoding. And it is a process of interpretation and translation of the coded message into a comprehensible form. It is to decode, it is to interpret, to extract the meaning, to translate the coded information in a comprehensible form. The audience or the receiver tries to reconstruct the idea by giving meanings to the symbols and by interpreting message as a whole. Here in this process of decoding, the receiver reconstructs the idea. The receiver gives meaning to the encoded message. It may be some symbols may be there or some written form may be there. So the receiver tries to interpret that message, tries to give meaning to that message, which is encoded by the sender. This is decoding, and decoding requires proper attention. It should be unbiased. A decoder must not have some personal grudge to the receiver. If the decoding is based on this personal grudge, if a person is differential, having a different attitude towards the sender, then there may not happen the proper decoding. So it should be without any biases. It should be unbiased. It should be without any personal grudge. It should be without any discrimination. There shouldn't be any false assumption in the mind of the decoder about the receiver. Then only this decoding may be proper. Then we have the receiver. What is receiver? Receiver is the recipient of the message. He is an important element. The way the sender was important, or the way the sender is important, in the same way our receiver is important. And we expect the sender to have the ability and skill to receive, decode, and interpret the message. So that means the receiver must have the ability to decode the message, to interpret the message, and to understand the message. And in this stage, the receiver processes the information, understands its context, and analyzes its implications. So the receiver interprets the message, he analyzes the message, and he analyzes the context of the message. And this is one of the most crucial stages in the communication process. If the receiver can successfully decode the message, this implies the effectiveness of the communication process. If your receiver is well equipped with these qualities, with the decoding, with interpreting, with understanding, then the communication would be effective. Then there would be effective communication process. And it is because of this, businesses continue their operations with little disruption. It is because of the effective receiver, communications occur, communications prolong, communications go on, businesses go on, trades go on because of effective communication and because of effective receivers. Then feedback. The last element is feedback, very important, because feedback gives you an assurance whether your communication was successful or it was a failure. So feedback in communication is the response. It is the response sent by, just a minute. Your feedback is the response or reaction or information which is given by the recipient of a message to the sender. And it is the process of letting someone know which areas they need to improve. It is because of the feedback you let your sender know where to improve. What are the other things needed for the effective communication? So it is because of feedback one can know where to improve. What are one's weak zones and what are one's strong zones? So feedback is essential to effective communication. Why? Because it helps the sender to check that his message or her message has been understood and received as intended, or modify his or her communication strategy as needed. So your feedback, if you are a sender, it is the feedback which you received from the receiver that lets you know whether you were successful, whether your message is successfully understood by the receiver or not. And it is the feedback which lets you to know where to modify your communication strategy if it is needed. So feedback is essential. In this stage, the receiver becomes the sender and he needs to go through all the above steps to send feedback. So when a sender sends a feedback, now he is sending the feedback, so he is sending information. So he becomes the sender of the information. So he has to follow all the elements which the sender has followed when he sent his message, his or her message. So it is a cycle of communication. So communication, it goes on this cyclic manner. What is the importance of feedback in communication? Number one, it completes the process of communication and makes it continuous. It completes when you are sending the feedback, like you are satisfied, so communication is completed. When you are sending the feedback, when you require more information, further clarification, so you continue the communication. So this completeness and continuous nature of communication depends upon feedback. Then it sustains communication process. So communication process can be sustained by feedback. Then it makes one know if one is really communicating or making sense. It makes one know whether you make sense or not, whether your communication is successful or not. It is the basis for measuring the effectiveness of communication. We measure the effectiveness of communication by feedback. By feedback, a sender gets to know how successful he was while delivering a message. So we measure the effectiveness of communication with the help of feedback. It is good basis for planning on what next to be done. So your feedback lets you to know what you should do at the next stage. in the next step. Communication will be useless without feedback. It's useless without feedback. And feedback paves the way for new idea generation. So feedback, it gives you the way for the new idea generation to generate new ideas. So this is all about feedback. So here I finished all the topics. Here I finished all the 7 elements which we talked about, which are required for an effective communication. I told you there are 7 elements which are required for the effective communication, and I discussed all the 7 elements one by one. I hope you all have understood well all these elements. Communication process is incomplete without all these 7 elements. I hope you have well understood all these elements. If you want to learn more on the communication process, on the elements, these are some books which you can check, which you can go through, and where you can get a comprehensive material on elements of communication. Thank you. Thank you for listening me carefully. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.